But if we're trying to help people work better with kids, you can't train them on how to act in every situation because it's just too many situations. What you need to train them to do is trust their instinct, to have some basis in some theory that they really understand the cause and effect of what they do, so that when they're in that situation, they're making good choices that are effective and they feel confident doing it.
Hello everyone. Welcome to School After Hours podcast, where we talk about all things related to out-of-school time programming and education. I am your host, Jay Lee, and in this episode, we sit down with Eva Joe Meyers, a seasoned expert in youth development and co-creator of the innovative Spark Deck, a creative set of cards that introduce quality strategies to youth development professionals and personal development skills to youth through fun, quick activities. Join us as Eva shares how her creative tools and years of experience led her to co-create the Spark Deck and transform transition times into engaging learning experiences. Whether you're a frontline educator or administrator, Eva's insights on managing transitions and fostering professional growth are sure to inspire you to turn downtime into fun and learning opportunities. Without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into our episode. Hey Eva, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, of course.
No problem. So I was sitting there and mentally having a brain fart at the same moment because I've said it so many times. So please forgive me. But as we were talking earlier in our Tell Us Your Story and in our community corner, just flashes of all these moments came to mind, and some of them that you've shared with me as we've had like the pre-interview. During this serious downtime when things could go to the left in programming, like how do we begin to feel that time and why it's important to have those fillers? So for our conversation, can you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your cards and how it was developed in the process? What was the idea that sparked it?
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So you want me to talk about all the cards or this particular deck?
That particular deck.
This particular deck. Okay. So this is our deck of back pocket activities. And the cool thing about it is it fits in your back pocket, right? It's like a little deck that goes in your back pocket. And what I realized was I was doing a lot of professional development around behavior guidance and positive behavior guidance. And I would ask staff, when in your program do you experience the most unwanted behaviors? Like, when are you experiencing the most conflicts between students or the most students being off task, or when is it happening? And you start to see patterns when you ask that question 100 times. And one of the patterns that we realized is that a lot of negative behaviors that you don't want to see in your program happen when the kids have nothing to do or are waiting around for something or are in that kind of uncomfortable space of changing between one thing and another. And we knew, because we've been doing it for so long, that the best way to address that is not by making a bunch of punishments and consequences for kids who weren't lining up or who weren't sitting quietly waiting for the thing. The best way to address it was to give them something alternative to do that was fun and that they wanted to do and took their mind off the boredom of waiting or the stress of changing locations between classes or whatever it was. And so the idea with the back pocket activities is that they really help you in those transitions and downtimes to change those from times in your program where fights are happening or kids are getting lost or kids are complaining, to fun times where kids look forward to, we're going to get to walk from our classroom to the playground, and that's going to be fun because we're going to do it in this fun way. So that was the idea behind this deck.
Right. And what are some of the things to keep in mind as you're doing or as you're using these cards?
So one of the things that we always talk about is these are just sparks. So it's going to have one small idea on it. And it is not like a lesson plan with a bunch of rules and exactly how to do it. So one of the things that's really important is you read it or you have the kids read it or pick one or whatever. And then you might have to make some decisions as a group about what exact rules you're going to use when you play this. I like to describe it like Foursquare. I think every different school you go to has different rules for Foursquare, right? The kids have different ways they like to play. And it's the same with these cards. They're not meant to be followed like a strict curriculum. They're just meant to be an idea. So you read it and then you decide with your kids, how do we want to implement this? The other rule that I always tell people is to never play the game for more than 5 minutes. You don't want the kids to get bored of it. So you play, and if you're still waiting after 5 minutes, you're like, okay, we're going to pick another one now and do a different one, because you want to be able to play it again the next day. And if they've gotten bored of it, they're not going to want to play it again.
Right, exactly, exactly. And you bring up such a good point to switch it up and do something different, because within transitions, kids can sometimes get familiar with games to the point where they're shouting them out, let's do, making 10,000 suggestions. So it's always good to change it up during the transitions from classroom to maybe you're going down to lunch or to snack, from cleaning up an activity to potentially switching over to a workshop that's going to be facilitated by another group. So I love those suggestions that you're giving to everyone. But before we dive deeper into this conversation, we're going to go ahead and take a quick break. So everyone go ahead, get your tea, get your coffee, get your snack, whatever it is that you need to do for the moment. Go ahead and take care of that and come back and join us in a couple of moments. Don't go too far. Are you a program provider or administrator struggling with planning day-to-day logistics for your after-school program? Or maybe you have a complete brain freeze when it comes to planning program activities. Or somewhere along the lines of when it's time to plan your activities, you have no idea where to start. What if I told you you don't have to figure those things out by yourself? Hi, my name is Janice Lee. I'm a former after-school program director and the founder of School After Hours Consulting, where we help youth program managers create impactful programs that ensure student success. With my 20 years of experience, I can definitely help you figure out all those things. Book a free 20-minute discovery call where we can get to know each other a little bit more, see if we can find simple solutions to your current challenges, and if you need it, we can see how we can work together. I look forward to hearing from you soon. Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. We are having a conversation with Eva Joe Meyers. She is one of the co-creators of the Spark Deck. Think of it as the little tool in your pocket that helps keep order from all the chaos that could potentially happen, right? So before we went on break, we were talking about the importance of how to use one of the Spark Deck cards, which was your back pocket games, and how they can be used, especially when you're transitioning from one thing or one place to the next. So Eva, my question is, I know that this started off as one idea with one deck, but I know that you've expanded it and you have gone out to create other decks that involve different things. So can you share with us a little bit about your other decks and what they do?
Yeah, sure. We kind of group our decks into different categories. So the back pocket activities deck, we would put in our category along with like our positive behavior guidance deck and maybe even our social and emotional learning decks that we have. But then we also have decks that we, for example, we group together as academic support decks. So those include our decks on Common Core math for early elementary, which really is because these ideas are meant to be adjusted depending on the age of your youth. You can actually use this through middle school because you just make the game harder. Instead of using the numbers 1 through 10, you use fractions or decimals, or there's always ways to modify that piece about modifying the activities. And other decks in this category are like supporting English language learners, and we have also Common Core language arts. We have decks around supporting issues of equity and inclusion, like supporting youth with disabilities, LGBTQ plus youth. And then our last category is about kind of supporting the administrative roles. So we have some decks on things like everyday continuous quality improvement that we put together with Public Profit, which is a evaluation firm that works heavily with expanded learning, and things like micro practices for self-care, that's really important. Like, how do we center care for ourselves and our students? And so those go into sort of the more, branch of decks that would be of interest to supervisors.
Nice, nice. And I love that they tackle a different thing. You have some for the frontline workers that are working with children on a day-to-day basis. Then you have some that you could pull into professional development with staff and so on and so forth. So I love the range and the variety that you all have been able to produce to tackle each area of work when it comes to out of school time programming or professional development. So I think that is amazing. What was the idea behind doing a specific deck for evaluation and professional development? Like, what's the story behind that one?
Yeah, you may have experienced this yourself, or some of the listeners may have experienced this. You hear that you're going to be having a site visit from somebody, and suddenly the kids are acting like they've never seen an outside person in their program before. All sorts of things start to fall apart. Staff get nervous, students get nervous. And then people come in with a clipboard and a checklist, and they make some notes and they leave, it's just like a lot of stress, and the end goal is not always so clear. So with everyday CQI, what we wanted to do is sort of give ownership of program evaluation back to the people who are actually running the program. Mm-hmm. And so the ideas in this deck are ways that you can self-evaluate, ways that you can use evaluation data, ways that you can make just improving your program kind of a regular part of what you do. So it's not just this once a year thing where a group of people in suits come in and tell you what you're doing wrong. Like, we wanted to make it just every day, an everyday thing. So yeah. And luckily for us, we're friendly with the folks over at Public Profit. And so we worked with their staff. A couple of our decks have been created that way, but with crowdsourced ideas. Mm-hmm. And so the staff there crowdsourced their ideas and came up with some categories that are reflected in the deck. So, in this particular one, some of the categories are just get grounded in CQI. What is it? What does that mean? Just continuing quality improvement. And then center your stakeholders. So how do you make the voices of the kids really be what shines, and the stories of how this is helping your family and the community shine? Reflect and make meaning out of your data. Things like that. Those are some of the categories in here. So that's the story of this one.
And I think that's great, because so many times during programming, you have the executive director or whomever come into programming and see you all one time, then they give you this feedback, and then you're supposed to be doing these changes. And then you have the chaos that goes along with it, because the kids act like like you said, they've never seen an outside person come in to programming before. But with this tool that I'm so happy that you all were able to create, it makes it a muscle that you're consistently practicing, right? Yeah. So as individuals come in, it's nothing new to your students, your families, and definitely not anything new to your staff. But it also gives them a way to kind of focus down. And what I hear is exercise a little bit of self-care at the same time. And also in program evaluation, getting down to the root of being centered in what your kids need, but also what your families need.
Exactly. And actually having evaluation that is useful to you, and learning that's useful to you and the folks who you're working with.
Exactly. So being that you have this plethora of Spark Deck cards, what are some of the impacts that you've seen, not just on a program level, but also on a staffing level?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I was really concerned about when we started out, and having experienced a lot of professional development myself, is that, sometimes you'd be asked to go into a professional development and the people would just sit there and talk at you and tell you what you already knew. And it was so demeaning, and it felt like a waste of time. And a lot of times I disagreed with what the people were saying. And that was so frustrating to me. And I wanted to see if there was a way to do professional development differently that really allowed people in the room to bring their own wisdom and experience and teach each other. Like, I'm not the be all end all expert for everything. I don't know your program. I don't know your kids. I don't know the environment that you're acting in. So like, even in the back pocket activities, we play all these games and do all these activities in the workshop, but a big part of the workshop, we spend just as much time having folks teach the group activities that they do with their kids that may or may not be in the deck. Like, how do you handle this situation when you're out on a field trip and the bus isn't there? What are the activities you would do with kids in that scenario? And then they teach each other. And so I think what I've seen and what I've really tried to push in my colleagues who also do professional development is to do that, to not just sit there with your PowerPoint and tell everybody what they need to do, but to help the staff who are in your professional development teach each other and come up with meaning for themselves. Because if you don't do that, they're not going to go back and use what you've showed them in the workshop, because it's too abstract and it's not connected to their own personal experience in any way. And so I have seen a lot of facilitators move in that direction, and in their workshops, make it more hands-on, let the participants give the answers. I don't call it training. I call it professional development. Training, I say, is like what you do to a dog, where you say, here's the input, and when I give you this input, I want you to have this response. But if we're trying to help people work better with kids, you can't train them on how to act in every situation, because it's just too many situations. What you need to train them to do is trust their instinct, to have some basis in some theory that they really understand the cause and effect of what they do, so that when they're in that situation, they're making good choices that are effective and they feel confident doing it. So that's a change that I feel like a lot of people have made in their professional development. I do feel like I go to conferences and I see less and less of the talking heads and more of the hands-on conversations happening, or even moments where there's round tables and encouraging people to share.
And that's helpful because it moves from a facilitator-centered training to now community development training. So you're pulling from each other to share ideas, to give advice, to go over strategy. And as you're building yours, have someone to check it for you, just in case, that peer-to-peer editing that we used to do in high school and in middle school.
Exactly. It's just so much more powerful. Like, people walk away really feeling empowered and like, I can do this and I want to try doing it. Right. Whereas if I just tell you, here's what to do when a student says no, when you ask them to put their backpack away, that's not going to work. No one's going to be able to act that out.
So going through these pocket games and also doing professional development for out of school time programming, are there any additional resources that people could keep in mind when it comes to managing transitions with their youth, or professional development when it comes to their staff?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, one thing that I really like to encourage too is I always talk about, like, I want to work myself out of a job. And so a lot of these programs are called like Train the Trainer, or, send them out to do things with some of your, like, if your state has a convening organization or an intermediary, send them out to be on those committees, give them opportunities to see what's out there besides just what's in their program, give them opportunities to develop skills. And because there's a lot of offerings out there, both nationally and, statewide, and often even locally. And just because people get a lot out of learning from people at other sites and other districts and other places. So that would be one resource that I'd really encourage programs to consider, is like getting out of your bubble.
Anything to keep in mind as you are doing transitions with youth on the day-to-day basis? Any resources in addition to the Spark Deck cards?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I think that there's a lot of just games and just actually supplies that you could get to make it fun, like you have in your pocket a set of juggling bags or something, or a deck of cards, like playing cards, or you have like a stack of paper that you keep. So I would also think about supplies, like as you're thinking about back pocket activities, like what's a bunch of like something really fun, like you see someone is giving away a big box of tennis balls or something, and you think, oh, maybe I could use that in a transition activity, or like at some point if I need it. So just collecting some materials.
That is true. And when you talk about it, I like the idea of keeping playing cards because even as a kid, we were always willing to play like a game of Uno, which has gotten like very, very intense lately.
Yeah,
With these new Uno games that's coming out, like,
I know. I know. Yeah. And it's hard to follow the rules for me because I got the old rules in my
right,
head.
right. I'm like, whatever
Yeah.
happened, just put one card down and then that person collects two. Like, no, we doing stacking and then it's a whole different thing. But yeah, like having those additional tools with you to keep the attention of the kids, but also keep them organized and still having fun at the same time. So I definitely support that idea of keeping additional things in your toolbox to keep them engaged and interested. But before we go, we're going to go ahead and transition into our Professionals Lounge. Professionals Lounge is a segment of the show that allows guests to share advice with other practitioners in the OST and youth development field about how they can begin growing their gifts and talents, but also develop themselves as professionals in the field. Here's our Professionals Lounge conversation. Welcome to Professionals Lounge. So, Eva, my question for you is, what advice would you give people who are interested in making this a full-time career?
Yeah. I mean, expanded learning is not necessarily considered the top of the education tower, sadly, in terms of how much people are paid and how secure the jobs are, and benefits even, because sometimes they're just part-time jobs that don't offer health benefits or vacation time. So it can be hard to make it a lifelong career because financially it can just be difficult, or as you get older in life and you want to have a family or you want to have whatever it is, it can be hard if you're working as a frontline staff and you love what you do, but you're not being paid in a way that's commensurate with the value that you're bringing to the community, unfortunately. So one of the things I found a lot when I work with staff is that the only way for them to move up is to stop working directly with youth and go into administration. Or sometimes it's to go ahead and get a degree in counseling or teaching so that they can earn a higher wage with those licensing. Those licenses just tend to bring higher wages and jobs. It's a different kind of work, unfortunately. And then another way is sometimes people move agencies. So if they're in a place where there's a different agency around, they may be able to move up in some way, but still work with youth or have a job that they still like, but there's a higher pay benefit. So it's a question you have to ask yourself. And I've periodically gone back to teaching to get regrounded with working with kids, since that's what I initially went in and loving to do. And I think it's a decision that people who want to work in expanded learning as a profession have to ask themselves, like, am I willing to step away from being the direct service provider with youth? And if so, then I'm going to need to build my skills in something tangential to still support the work. So that might be staff supervision, that might be grant writing or fundraising, that might be administration and, executive director level jobs, or working on an intermediary, on the sides, providing professional development, which is the way I went with it. But like I said, even for my own self, I've gone back every 8 or so years and 5 or 8 years and gone back into the classroom. I would feel like a hypocrite if all I was doing was professional development, was never actually using the strategies myself firsthand.
Right.
You got to go back in and make sure that you're walking the talk, right? And practicing what you preach. So I feel like it's important to stay grounded in the practical side of it too. But yeah, that's, what all I can say from my own experience and from watching the folks who I've supported over the years. Eventually people have to make a decision. It feels like of, am I going to move up into a more administrative role or find a role where I can earn a living wage and get benefits?
Right. And sometimes that's a hard decision to make, but it's the question of your livelihood, right? So do we stay in a place where we are getting paid like pennies, nickels, quarters, and dimes compared to others that are making like thousands and thousands of dollars a year, hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to live? Or do we make that choice to kind of find an in between where we can have the best of both? And that choice, even stepping out and doing the consulting personally, that choice can be kind of hard because you love working with the children because that's what you got in it for. But also in the same breath, when you're looking at your paycheck, you're like, I don't know about this. 1 + 1 don't equal 2.
Right. Yeah, and it's hard. And I really wish that folks in expanded learning were more valued and had sort of a similar track as teachers do, where they could earn benefits and retire towards retirement, because I feel like the job they do is just as valuable, and in some cases maybe even more valuable than what teachers do in the relationship building. And often the expanded learning programs go so long, you're with the kids for as long as a teacher is during the day, because some of the programs go like pretty late in the evening. So it's the way it is right now. There's been a lot of talk about how to professionalize the field so that people can earn more and still continue doing this important work. But until we're there, people have to make some choices.
Right. Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of our show. But Eva, if anyone wanted to get in touch with you, how would they find you on social media? What are some of the outlets that you use for contact? Give us all those things.
Yeah, the best place is just to go to our website and use our contact form to reach out. SparkDex. I know you said you'd put the link below so people can get it. And I'm not really on social media much other than on LinkedIn. So you could look for me there on LinkedIn, and SparkDex has a page on LinkedIn. You can find us there.
Well, everyone, that brings us to the end of our show. If you liked what you heard and you enjoyed our conversation, make sure that you're following us on YouTube, but also hit that like button so we know what you are enjoying. You can also find us on other podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts if you want to listen to our audio version as well. To get more behind the scenes stuff, make sure that you're following us on our social media accounts, Instagram and Facebook at School After Hours. Well, that's all I have for today. In the words of Mr. Arthur Ashe, start where you are, use what you have, do what you can. Until next time, y'all. Bye-bye.